The door creaked open just as the steam from the shower hit its peak, wrapping me in a haze that blurred the edges of everything. I froze under the spray, heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out. Because there she was, Grace, standing in the threshold of my bathroom with a towel clutched in her hands and eyes wide as saucers. In that split second, the world narrowed to the drip of water on tile and the way her lips parted without a sound. Like she'd swallowed the air between us whole. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly the shower curtain was yanked back. And I was scrambling for cover that wasn't there, my skin prickling under the sudden chill of exposure. Grace dropped the towel, her face draining of color. And for what felt like forever, neither of us could string together a word, just breaths hanging heavy in the steam-filled air. That morning in my cramped Brooklyn walk-up, everything I thought I knew about boundaries shattered like the cheap mirror ID cracked last month. Grace had been my roommate for 6 weeks. Ever since she'd answered my frantic Craigslist ad with a lopsided smile and a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. She'd shown up on a rainy Tuesday, hair plastered to her forehead, declaring she was fleeing a bad breakup in Chicago and needed a fresh start in the city that never sleeps. I was Ella, 28, a junior reporter at the Village Voice, scraping by on freelance gigs and too many late nights chasing stories that never quite panned out. Our place was a third-floor railroad apartment on Atlantic Avenue. The kind where you could hear the F train rumble through the walls and smell the halal cart from the street below. It was cheap, chaotic, and somehow, with her in it, starting to feel like home. Grace was 32. A former graphic designer who'd pivoted to owning a tiny used bookstore in Park Slope called Pages Unbound. She had this way of talking about books like they were old lovers, full of regret and lingering affection. Her voice low and smoky from years of Midwestern winters. She'd dye her dark waves with streaks of caramel that caught the light just so. And her laugh, it was rare. But when it came, it rolled like thunder over Lake Michigan. We clicked from day one. Or at least I thought we did. Shared grocery runs to the bodega on the corner. Splitting bottles of cheap Merlot while binging true crime docs. Her feet tucked under my thigh on the sagging couch. But there were lines we never crossed. Invisible ones drawn in the sand of polite small talk and separate bedrooms. Until that shower. I'd woken up late. Alarm blaring through a hangover from a networking happy hour that had devolved into shots with editors who promised the world and delivered nothing. The water was scalding, meant to wash away the fog in my head. The nagging doubt that I'd ever make it as a writer in this cutthroat town. I didn't hear the front door. Didn't catch the jingle of her keys or the thud of her boots on the hardwood. Grace had an early shift, stacking shelves before the morning crowd of stroller-pushing moms and dog walkers trickled in. Or so I thought. When she burst in, it wasn't with malice. No. It was panic pure and simple. She'd forgotten her spare key inside last night. Locked herself out after a midnight walk to clear her head. And used the super to let her back in. The super? That grizzled old-timer named Manny. Had grumbled something about not being a locksmith and handed her the master key with a wink. Grace, flustered and keyless, had headed straight for the bathroom to grab the spare from the cabinet under the sink, figuring I'd still be dead to the world. But I wasn't. And now, here we were, me naked and dripping, her rooted to the spot in her wool coat still dusted with last night's drizzle. The silence stretched, taut as a wire, until she finally rasped, her voice barely above the patter of water. Ella, I thought you were at work. God. I'm sorry. She backed up a step, hand fumbling for the doorknob. But her eyes, they lingered. Not on my body, but on my face, searching for something I couldn't name. I snatched the fallen towel, wrapping it around myself like armor, water sluicing down my legs in cold rivulets. Grace. Wait. My voice cracked. Smaller than I intended. Heat flooded my cheeks. Not just from the shower, but from the rawness of it all, the vulnerability of being seen. Truly seen. In a moment when I was anything but composed. I'd always prided myself on control. On the crisp lines of my notebook pages filled with leads and quotes. But this was chaos. Intimate and uncharted. She didn't run. Instead, she leaned against the doorframe, coat slipping off one shoulder, and let out a breath that was half sigh, half laugh. You know, in all my years of walking in on exes doing worse, this takes the cake. At least you're not mid-argument with the cat. Her attempt at humor fell flat. But it cracked the ice. Just enough for us both to exhale. I stepped out. Toes curling on the bath mat. The towel biting cold against my heels. It's fine. Really. I mean, it's not. But. Boundaries. Right? We suck at them. I forced a smile. But it wobbled. And suddenly tears pricked my eyes hot and unbidden. Why? Embarrassment. Sure. But deeper. A loneliness I'd been ignoring. The kind that creeps in after too many solitary mornings and evenings where the city's hum feels more like isolation than energy. Grace noticed. Of course she did. She crossed the small space in 2 strides. Her arms coming around me before I could protest. The scent of rain and her lavender soap enveloping me. Hey, she murmured into my wet hair. It's okay. We're okay. Her hold was firm. Grounding. And for the first time in months, I let myself lean in. The towel dampening her sweater. We stood like that until the water ran cold in the pipes. The steam dissipating like unspoken words. When we pulled apart, her thumb brushed a tear from my cheek. And in that touch, something shifted, a spark. Fragile and flickering. That neither of us acknowledged. Not yet. The rest of the day blurred into awkward normalcy. I threw on jeans and a faded Mets tee. Scarfing down toast slathered with peanut butter while Grace brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint. She chattered about a first-edition Hemingway shed scored at an estate sale in Queens. Her words tumbling out too fast. Filling the silence we'd both rather forget. I nodded along. Scribbling notes for a piece on urban foraging in the abandoned lots of the Bronx. But my mind kept drifting back to the bathroom. To the way her gaze had held mine. Unflinching. By noon, I was out the door. Subway rattling me toward Midtown for an interview with a community organizer fighting gentrification in Harlem. The city assaulted me as always, skyscrapers clawing at the November sky. Vendors hawking roasted chestnuts that smelled like nostalgia I couldn't afford. Grace texted midway through, "Don't forget to eat something real. PB toast doesn't count." I smiled despite myself. Thumbs hovering over a reply that felt too loaded. "Thanks. Roomie. Oh, you won." Her shift ended at 6. And by the time I dragged home, arms laden with takeout from the Thai place on Smith Street, the apartment glowed with the soft amber of string lights shed hung last week. Grace was curled on the couch, legs tucked under a blanket, nose buried in a dog-eared copy of The Bell Jar. She looked up, that lopsided smile breaking through, and patted the cushion beside her. Truce? Pad Thai and bad TV? We ate from cartons balanced on our knees. Forks clinking against plastic. The TV droning some reality show about house flippers in the Hamptons. Laughter came easier than expected. Sparked by a contestant's botched demolition that sent dust billowing like a bad special effect. But under it, tension simmered. Glances lingering a beat too long. Knees brushing accidental but electric. Halfway through the 2nd episode, Grace set her carton aside, twisting to face me. Her eyes, hazel flecked with gold, searched mine again. That same intensity from the morning. "Ella," she started. Voice soft. "About earlier. I didn't mean to invade your space. It's just living here with you. It feels so easy. Like I can breathe again." I swallowed. The rice noodles sticking in my throat. "It's not you. It's me. I mean, the city, it's a beast. You know? Chews you up if you let it. And mornings like today, they remind me how alone that can feel." The confession slipped out. Raw and unpolished. The kind of truth I usually reserved for anonymous sources. She reached for my hand, fingers interlacing with a gentleness that unraveled me. "You're not alone. Not while I'm here." Her thumb traced circles on my knuckles. And the room shrank. The TV faded to white noise. I wanted to pull away. To crack a joke and shatter the moment. But I couldn't. Instead, I leaned in. Our foreheads touching. Breaths mingling in the scant space between. The kiss, when it came, was inevitable, slow and tentative. Tasting of soy and unspoken longing. Grace's lips were soft. Hesitant at first. Then deepening with a hunger that mirrored my own. My free hand found her waist, bunching the fabric of her shirt. And she sighed into my mouth. A sound that vibrated through me like a tuning fork. We broke apart gasping. Foreheads still pressed. The world tilting on its axis. "Grace," I whispered. Voice hoarse. "What are we doing?" She pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. Her own shimmering. Falling? I think. Or maybe we already have. That night? We didn't sleep in separate beds. The air between us hummed with possibility. Her body fitting against mine under the threadbare quilt like it had always belonged there. Whispers in the dark turned to confessions. Grace about the girlfriend had left her for a safer life in the suburbs. Me about the string of dates that fizzled because no one saw past my bylines to the woman scribbling poetry in the margins. Dawn crept in, painting the walls in hues of rose and gold. And for the first time, the city outside felt less like a predator and more like a canvas. Vast and waiting. But New York has a way of testing fragile things. By midweek, my editor dumped a breaking story on me: a corruption scandal involving city council members and shady developers in Staten Island. It meant 70-hour weeks. Stakeouts in the fog-shrouded ferry terminals. Interviews with whistleblowers who chain-smoked Camels and spoke in hushed tones about bribes tucked into brown paper bags. Grace understood. Or tried to. Leaving care packages on the kitchen counter, thermos of coffee. Scribbled notes quoting Auden, "We must love one another or die." But the distance grew. Measured in missed dinners and texts left on read. One evening, I stumbled home at 2 a.m., reeking of cigarette smoke and desperation, only to find her pacing the living room, arms crossed tight over her chest. The bookstore had a slow day, Shed said earlier, but now her face was a storm cloud. Eyes red-rimmed. "Aya. We need to talk." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" I kicked off my boots. The thud echoing too loud in the quiet. She stopped, hands raking through her hair. "This acid's consuming me. Every time the door opens and it's not you. Or it is but you're a ghost of yourself. I can't keep pretending it's enough." Her voice broke, a tremor running through it. And she turned away, shoulders shaking. I crossed to her, hands hovering before settling on her arms. "Grace. The story, it's big. It could be my break. But you're right. I've been checked out." The admission burned. A mirror to my own fears of failing at both love and ambition. She spun, tears spilling freely now. "Then choose. Us. Or the grind. Because I came here to start over. Not to watch you disappear." The words hung, sharp as shattered glass. I pulled her close, her sobs muffled against my shirt. And in that embrace, I felt the weight of it all, the thrill of the chase warring with the ache of connection. "I choose us," I murmured, meaning it more than I'd ever meant a deadline. "The story can wait." "You can't." We talked until the sky lightened, unraveling the knots of doubt with careful words and tentative touches. By morning, the apartment felt renewed, sunlight slanting through the blinds like forgiveness. Grace called in sick, and I emailed my editor a polite deferral. The scandal suddenly less urgent than the woman brewing espresso in our mismatched mugs. Winter deepened, blanketing the city in a hush of snow that muffled the horns and hurried footsteps. We ventured out together. Grace's bookstore became my second office. Me hunched over my laptop amid the scent of aged paper and her occasional glances that made my pulse stutter. One blustery afternoon, as flurries danced past the window, she closed early and dragged me to the High Line. The elevated park strung with holiday lights that twinkled like stars brought low. Bundled in scarves and gloves, we walked hand in hand, breath fogging the air. "Remember that first week?" she asked, stopping to lean on the railing, the Hudson glittering below. "You burned the popcorn?" And we ended up ordering pizza at 3 a.m., debating if Casablanca was overrated. I laughed, the sound warm against the chill. "It was. Bogart, who needs him when you've got that smile?" I tugged her closer, kissing her temple, the world fading to just us. But shadows lingered. Grace's ex, a sharp-tongued lawyer named Riley, started texting cryptic apologies, then escalated to voicemails laced with regret. "I was wrong to leave. Chicago feels empty without you." Grace deleted them at first, but doubt crept in, a quiet erosion. I'd catch her staring at her phone during quiet evenings, jaw tight, and when I'd ask, she'd wave it off with a forced grin. Old ghosts. Nothing more. My own demons stirred too. The deferred story broke without me, splashed across the Times front page. My sources scooped by hungrier reporters. Jealousy gnawed, a bitter undercurrent to my days, making me snap over small things: spilled coffee, a forgotten dish. One night, after a particularly brutal shift where a customer berated Grace over a late shipment, she came home fuming, slamming cabinets hard enough to rattle the windows. "People are assholes," she spat, yanking open the fridge for a beer. "Entitled? Demanding? Like the world's ending if their order ships a day late." I reached for her, but she shrugged me off. "Let me help. You can't fix everything. Ella. Not this. Not me." Her words cut, laced with exhaustion, and she sank onto a stool, head in hands. The fight brewed slow, then erupted over dinner pad thai again. Irony not lost on us. I accused her of shutting me out. She fired back that I treated her like a side project to my career. Voices rose, words flung like snowballs, until she grabbed her coat. "I need air. Don't follow." The door clicked shut, and silence crashed in, heavier than the snow piling outside. I paced, heart hammering, replaying every barb, every missed cue. Hours ticked by, the clock mocking me with its steady tick. By 11, panic set in. Shed never stayed out this late in a storm. I texted, called, got nothing but the endless ring. When the key turned at midnight, relief flooded me, chased by guilt. Grace stumbled in, cheeks flushed from cold, eyes puffy. Snow dusted her lashes like frost. I walked to the bridge, watched the lights on the water, thought about us. I pulled her inside, peeling off her coat, rubbing warmth into her arms. "I'm sorry. For pushing. For not seeing how hard this is." She leaned into me, voice muffled. "Me too. Riley called again today. Said shed visit. Make things right." But I told her no. "Because it's you. Ella. It's always been you since that stupid shower." Tears came then, mutual and cathartic, washing away the grime of unspoken fears. We made love that night slow, deliberate, rediscovering each curve and sigh as if for the first time. The city slept outside, but in our bed, dawn broke early, full of promises whispered against skin. Spring unfurled tentative, cherry blossoms riding along the avenues, the air thick with possibility. Grace expanded the bookstore, adding a reading nook with mismatched armchairs and a sign that read "Stories Welcome." I landed a steady gig at a local mag, profiling queer artists reshaping the scene in Bushwick warehouses. Life settled into a rhythm, comfortable yet charged, like the hum of the subway beneath our feet. Yet the universe, ever the jester, had one more twist. In June, during Pride, we marched down Fifth Avenue, rainbows fluttering in the breeze, chants rising like a heartbeat. Hand in hand, sweat slick and euphoric, we lost each other in the crush. Panic flickered, but then I spotted her atop a float, waving a flag with that radiant grin. Our eyes locked across the sea of bodies, and she jumped down, weaving through the crowd until she crashed into me, laughing breathless. "Never again," she gasped, kissing me fierce amid cheers and confetti. "You're stuck with me." That night, in a rooftop bar overlooking the parade, under strings of Edison bulbs swaying in the wind, Grace dropped to one knee. Not with a ring traditional. No, but with a vintage copy of Giovanni's Room. Its pages marked with her notes in the margins. Declarations of love scrawled in looping script. "Marry me, Ella." Not because it's perfect, but because it's us messy, real, speechless sometimes. Tears blurred my vision, joy bubbling up like champagne. Yes. God. Yes. The city celebrated with us. Fireworks bursting over the skyline. But our real explosion came later. Back home, bodies entwined in a tangle of limbs and laughter. We weren't flawless heroes. Just two women had stumbled into each other's lives, bared souls in steam and silence, and chosen to stay. Years later, when I think of that morning, the door creaking open, the world pausing on a breath, I don't regret the exposure. It stripped us bare. Yes. But in the rawness, we found grace. Not the end of a story, but the beginning of ours, a quiet revolution against the loneliness that lurks in every shadow. And in the end, that's the humanistic truth. Love doesn't arrive polished, it crashes in, leaves you drenched, and dares you to dry off together. Summer heat wave gripped the city like a fever dream, asphalt shimmering under a relentless sun that turned the subways into saunas. Grace and I had promised ourselves a getaway. Something beyond the concrete jungle. But my deadlines loomed like storm clouds, chaining me to the desk while she manned the store alone. She'd taken to leaving voicemails. Her voice a bomb over the static. Miss your chaos. Babe. Come home soon. I'd listen on stakeouts. Parked in unmarked cars outside nondescript brownstones. Chasing leads on a feature about underground queer poetry slams in the village. One sweltering Thursday. I wrapped early. The editor buying my pitch on the spot. And surprised her at Pages Unbound. The bell above the door tinkled. Cool air from the AC kissing my skin as I stepped into the dim haven of shelves groaning under tomes. Grace was behind the counter, fanning herself with a battered leaves of grass. Hair piled in a messy bun that exposed the nape of her neck. Dewy with sweat. Customers milled about a retiree browsing mysteries. A tattooed teen flipping through zines, but her eyes found mine across the room. Lighting up like the 4th of July. Ega? She vaulted the counter, ignoring the gasp from the retiree, and pulled me into a hug that smelled of ink and vanilla. What are you doing here? Escaping the inferno. And you? I kissed her quick, mindful of the audience. But she deepened it, heedless, until applause rippled from the poetry section. We closed up shop, flipping the sign to back at dawn, and wandered into the evening throng of Park Slope. Food trucks lined the avenue. Sizzle of falafel mingling with mariachi from a nearby festival. Grace linked her arm through mine, head on my shoulder as we queued for tacos al pastor. Pineapple chunks glistening like jewels. Tell me about the slams, she murmured, licking sauce from her thumb. Any lines that stuck? I recounted a piece on fractured hearts mended with glitter glue. The poet a non-binary firebrand with a voice like gravel and honey. Grace's laughter peeled, drawing stares. But she didn't care. We should host one. Turn the nook into a stage. The idea bloomed over our meal. Sketched on a napkin with borrowed pen, queer ink nights. Every other Friday. Open mic under fairy lights. By the time we tumbled into bed, exhausted and sticky, plans solidified. Her excitement infectious as she traced patterns on my belly with her fingertip. But euphoria has a shelf life in New York. The following week, Riley's shadow lengthened. Grace confessed over breakfast. Her cereal untouched. She emailed. Wants to meet for coffee. Clear the air. Says it's closure. My spoon clattered against the bowl. And I said no. But it stirred things up. Memories. You know? Her eyes distant, fixed on the window where pigeons strutted the fire escape. Jealousy twisted in my gut. Sharp and ungenerous. Memories or regrets? The words escaped before I could cage them. Laced with accusation. She recoiled. Spoon dropping. Ella. That's not fair. You know me. I did. But doubt whispered otherwise. Fueled by late nights scrolling her old photos online. The ones with Riley at Pride in Chicago. Arms wrapped tight. Then why entertain it? Why let her in your head? The argument simmered low. Voices hushed to avoid waking the neighbors. But it festered. Grace stormed to the store early, leaving me with cold coffee and a gnawing ache. I threw myself into work, interviewing poets in smoky basements off Bleecker Street. Their verses raw with loss and reclamation. One line haunted, "Love is the bruise you wear like a badge." It echoed as I typed furiously. But the screen blurred with unshed tears. Reconciliation came tentative. Grace slipping home with a piece offering a slim volume of Sappho's fragments. Translated by a woman who'd once loved fiercely and lost. We read aloud by candlelight. Her voice weaving ancient longing with modern ache. Until hands replaced words. Pulling us under the sheets in a frenzy of need and forgiveness. The first queer ink night was a triumph. The nook overflowed. Bodies spilling onto the sidewalk. Air thick with anticipation and cheap wine. Grace emceed in a thrifted blazer. Charisma crackling as she introduced acts of burlesque poets stripping verses with her clothes. A duo reciting duets on shared bedsheets. I manned the door, collecting donations in a tin that filled to brimming. My chest swelling with pride at the sight of her. Spotlighted and alive. Afterward, as stragglers nursed last drinks, a woman approached hesitant. Flyer clutched in manicured hands. This was incredible. Imlina, event planner for the center. Would love to collaborate. Grace beamed. But later, in the quiet cleanup, doubt crept back. What if it's too much? The exposure. The eyes on us. I swept glitter from the floor, kneeling to meet her gaze. Then we control it. Together. Autumn leaves carpeted the streets in crimson and gold, crunching under our boots as we strolled Central Park. Scarves knotted against the nip. Grace had taken to sketching again. Her old sketchpad revived with portraits of patrons, each face a story etched in charcoal. One evening, she showed me a series of me asleep on the couch, pen between teeth, a faint smile playing on my lips. "You inspire me," she said simply. And I kissed her until the paper crinkled between us. But Riley's persistence wore thin. A package arrived unmarked, containing a locket Grace had left behind, engraved with their initials. She stared at it for minutes, thumb tracing the clasp, before hurling it into the trash. Enough. That night, she broke in the shower, sobs echoing off tiles. And I held her under the spray, water mingling with tears. She's gone. But the what-ifs linger. What if ID stayed? What if this falls apart too? I cupped her face, thumbs stroking cheeks. Then we rebuild. Brick by brick. Page by page. Winter's grip tightened. Holidays looming with their tinsel expectations. We opted for low-key, a tree from the lot on Flatbush, strung with popcorn and paper cranes Grace folded from bookstore scraps. Christmas Eve. Snow blanketing the brownstones. We cooked a feast, ill-fated turkey that smoked the kitchen, forcing us to order Chinese. Laughter dissolved the mishap. Fortune cookies cracked open to predict a journey begins with a single step and love finds the quiet corners. New Year's dawned crisp. Resolutions whispered at midnight, more adventures. Less hesitation. We road-tripped to the Catskills. Winding roads flanked by evergreens heavy with frost. The cabin was rustic. Stone fireplace crackling as we roasted marshmallows. Stories spilling like sparks. Grace confessed a childhood dream of opening a writer's retreat. Cabins nestled in woods where words could breathe free. "With you," she added, eyes reflecting the flames. "Partner in crime and ink." I squeezed her hand. "Let's make it real." Back in the city, momentum built. The center partnership blossomed into a series. Queer ink expanding to pop-ups in Brooklyn warehouses and Manhattan lofts. My articles gained traction. One on Grace's events going viral in queer media circles. Success tasted sweet. But pressure mounted, auditions for MCs. Sponsor calls. The grind mirroring my old newsroom days. One February night, after a sold-out event in Williamsburg, Grace collapsed on the couch, wineglass trembling in her grip. "It's too fast. I'm drowning in schedules, losing the joy." I knelt beside her, massaging tense shoulders. "Then slow it. We're not machines." But the strain showed in snipped conversations. Silences stretching over breakfasts. Riley's final jab came via letter. Slipped under the door, "I saw your event ad. Proud. But I miss us. One coffee?" Grace burned it in the sink. Flames licking blue. But the ash lingered. A metaphor too on the nose. The blow-up hit during a nor'easter. Winds howling as thunder rumbled distant. I'd forgotten our anniversary, the day we first kissed, buried under event prep. Grace waited with candles and takeout, only to find me on a call with sponsors. Voice clipped. "Ella. It's us tonight." I hung up. Guilt crashing. "Shit. Baby. I'm sorry." Her face crumpled. Always the next thing. "When is it us?" Words failed, escalating to shouts that neighbors likely heard over the gale. She grabbed her keys. "I need space." The store crash pad. The door slammed. And solitude enveloped me, colder than the storm. I paced, replaying failures, until impulse drove me out into the squall. Hail pelted like accusations as I trudged to Park Slope. Storefronts shuttered save hers. A lone light burning. Inside, Grace huddled under a blanket amid unsold books. Eyes hollow. "Go home. Ella." "No." I locked the door. Snow melting in puddles at my feet. "I can't lose you to my blindness." She unfolded, arms opening. And we clung, weeping as the tempest raged. Confessions poured, my fear of stagnation, her terror of erasure. Dawn broke slate gray. But in her embrace, color returned. Spring renewal brought therapy. Joint sessions in a sunlit office overlooking the East River. We unpacked layers. Vulnerabilities laid bare like fresh earth. Grace sketched our progress. A tree with roots intertwining. Branches reaching. The retreat idea evolved. Crowdfunding launched with a video of us reading love poems. Her voice steady. Mine cracking with emotion. By summer, the first retreat sold out. Writers converging on a rented farm upstate. We facilitated workshops under maples. Evenings around bonfires sharing drafts and dreams. One participant, a shy novelist, pulled Grace aside. "You too, you're proof it's possible." Fall harvest. We hosted a vow renewal in the bookstore. Close friends toasting with mulled cider. No rings exchanged, but promises renewed. Etched in a shared journal, through speechless moments and stormy nights. We choose each other. As leaves turned, I reflected on that fateful walk in the vulnerability that birthed us. It wasn't perfection, but humanity in its messiest glory, resilient, tender, enduring. The Catskills retreat became annual. A pilgrimage for souls seeking solace and scribbles. Second year. We upgraded to a sprawling Victorian on a hill. Gables piercing the mist like quills. Writers arrived in droves, poets from Portland. Essayists escaping LA. Sprawl. A playwright had fled family drama in Texas. Grace orchestrated with grace. Herding schedules while I led prompts on vulnerability. Drawing from our own scarred pages. One misty morning, during a free write by the lake, a young woman named Theo approached. Notebook clutched like a shield. "Your story with grace, it's in every word you say. How do you write the hard parts without breaking?" I glanced across the water, where Grace laughed with a cluster of attendees. Her profile etched against fog. "You break a little each time. But sharing mends. It's the alchemy of ache." Theo nodded, scribbling furiously. And I wandered back, slipping my arm around Grace's waist. She leaned in, whispering, "They adore you. We adore this." A kiss, chaste but charged, drew whoops from the group. Back in Brooklyn, expansion tempted. Offers poured in for franchised events. Corporate tie-ins with publishers hungry for diverse voices. Grace hesitated over contracts, brow furrowed in the lamplight. "It's our baby. Do we share custody?" I massaged her temples. "Only if it grows us, not drains." We compromised. Piloting a satellite series in Chicago, her old haunt. A full-circle nod. The trip stirred ghosts. Riley lived blocks away. Her firm logo glaring from billboards. Grace tensed in the airport. Grip white-knuckled on her carry-on. "I haven't been back since." I squeezed her hand. "Then let's make new memories." The windy city welcomed with bluster. Lake Michigan churning gray under overcast skies. Our venue. A converted speakeasy in Wicker Park. Pulsed with energy, first night packed. Mics humming with verses on migration and desire. Grace shone. But post-event, in our hotel room overlooking the loop, she unraveled. "Walking these streets, it's like stepping into an old skin. Too tight." I drew her a bath. Bubbles foaming under tap. And joined her. Legs tangled in porcelain. "Shed you for comfort. You left for fire." "That's not regret, that's evolution." She traced my collarbone. Eyes softening. "You're my anchor." The series succeeded. But closure demanded confrontation. On a whim, Grace texted Riley, "Coffee?" Neutral ground. I waited at a nearby diner. Nerves jangling like loose change. Nursing black coffee that burned my tongue. She returned an hour later. Face flushed but resolute. It was civil. She apologized. Owned her fears. But seeing her I felt pity. Not pull. "You're mine now. Ella." Relief washed over me. And we celebrated with deep dish pizza. Cheese stretching like bridges between bites. Laughter echoing in the booth. Winter's Idol followed. Holidays hosted at our place now expanded with a second bedroom for guests. Manny the super-strung lights on the stoop. Grumbling but grinning. Family calls bridged miles, my parents in Seattle. Awkward but warming to our Ella and her Grace, hers in Milwaukee. Thawing over FaceTime toasts. New Year's. We danced in the living room to Coltrane. Bare feet on hardwood. Her head on my chest. "Resolutions," she murmured. "More of this. Less fear." Spring bloomed riotous. Cherry trees in Washington Square weeping pink petals like confetti. My book deal landed, a memoir on queer love in the city. Interlaced with Grace's illustrations. Agents buzzed. But imposter syndrome gnawed. Who am I to speak for us? I confessed one dawn. Staring at the ceiling. Grace rolled atop me. Hair curtaining our faces. You're the voice that found mine. Right it true. Summer scorched again. But we escaped to Fire Island. Ferry slicing waves to dunes fringed with seagrass. The pines thrummed with parties. But we sought quiet, a rented cottage with creaky porch. Waves lapping like lullabies. Days blurred into swims and siestas. Nights into stargazing. Her fingers mapping constellations on my thigh. One evening. Bonfire crackling on the beach. A group of locals invited us to a drag brunch. We went. Glitter-dusted and giddy. Toasting mimosas to icons lip-syncing Gaga. Grace. Tipsy and bold. Pulled me onto the sand dance floor. Body swaying to Bad Romance. Her whisper hot against my ear, "You're my monster." Back home. The memoir drafting intensified. Words pouring like rain. Grace read drafts aloud. Her critiques gentle scalpels honing edges. But midway. A chapter on our fight the storm night blowout stalled me. It's too raw, I admitted. Cursor blinking accusatory. She closed the laptop. Pulling me to the couch. Raw is real. That's why it resonates. Collaboration deepened, she illustrated pivotal scenes, the shower in vaporous blues. The bridge vigil in stormy grays. Gallery interest sparked. Her first solo show slated for fall at a Soho space. Autumn equinox brought harvest moons and harvest fairs. Our retreat theme that year. Writers foraged for metaphors in orchards. Apples crisp as fresh ideas. A mentor figure emerged. An elder lesbian author named Vivian. Who'd penned manifestos in the 70s. Over cider. She cornered us, "You two remind me of my youth, fierce. Flawed. Fertile. Guard that fire." Her words lingered as we drove back. Hudson Valley fading in the rearview. Fire, Grace echoed. Hand on my knee. That's us. Winter's chill ushered the show. Opening night. Gallery humming with critics and collectors. Grace's pieces glowed under spots the speechless moment rendered in watercolor haze. Our embrace a study in light and shadow. I circulated. Champagne flute in hand. Pride swelling as bids climbed. But midway. A familiar face, Riley. Sleek in a pantsuit. Appraising a canvas. Grace spotted her. Stiffening beside me. What is she doing here? I steered us away. But confrontation brewed. Riley approached post-toast. Smile polished. Stunning work. Grace. Congrats. Thanks. Grace's tone clipped. Arm linked tight in mine. Riley glanced at me. Nod cool. You've built something beautiful. Deserve it. As she melted into the crowd. Grace exhaled shuddery. Closure? I guess. Full circle. We slipped out early. Hailing a cab to the apartment. Where wine waited and worries dissolved in slow undress. You're my masterpiece, I breathed. Tracing her tattoos faded stars from youth. And you're my muse. Spring 2028. The memoir launched to acclaim. Signings in indie shops where fans queued with stories of their own speechless encounters. Grace illustrated the cover, two silhouettes in steam. Evocative yet chaste. Tours pulled us apart briefly. But reunions reignited. Hotel rooms becoming sanctuaries of reunion. One leg in San Francisco. Fog rolling off the bay. I called her from a hate bookstore. Miss you. City of flowers feels flowerless without you. Her laugh crackled over the line. Home soon. Pack the Merlot. Summer solstice. We married legally at City Hall. Witnesses are Supermanny and a bookstore clerk named Jax. Rings simple gold bands engraved with speechless. Exchanged under fluorescent hum. Reception at Pages Unbound. Shelves cleared for dancing. Cake a stack of books frosted in rainbow. Honeymoon in Provincetown. Dunes whispering secrets. Whale watches spotting breaches like omens. Nights in a lighthouse B&B. Beam sweeping rhythmic. Her body arching under mine like waves. Fall foliage tour. Leaves ablaze as we promoted joint projects, a graphic novel of our love. Panels blending text and art. Critics raved. But deeper. Readers connected, your story gave me courage to walk in. Winter's peace. Snow sculpting the city anew. Pregnant? No. But talks turned to family adoption fairs visited. Profiles poured over. Someday, Grace said. Curled by the fire. A little less. As years layered. That initial moment, the door. The steam. The silence evolved into legend, retold at events with laughter and awe. It wasn't the start, but the spark, the human spark of seeing and being seen, flaws and all. In quiet evenings, her head on my lap, book open unread, I marvel at the woman who'd walked in and stayed. Love, I learned, isn't absence of storm, it's the hand extended through it, pulling you to shore. The adoption process unfolded like a slow-blooming novel. Chapters of paperwork and home studies. Interviews where social workers probed our stability with gentle insistence. Grace documented it in a scrapbook, photos of us painting the nursery butter yellow. Shelves lined with board books and her illustrated tales. For the stories we'll tell, she said. Glue stick in hand. Spring brought approvals. A match, a 4-year-old girl named Lila. Foster system veteran with braids like twisted vines and eyes that held oceans. First meeting in a park off the Grand Concourse. Bronx breathing heavy with traffic and trees. Lila swung high, laughter pealing, while Grace pushed gentle. Me snapping candids on my phone. Mamas, she asked later. Ice cream dripping chin. The word tentative as a first step. We nodded. Throats tight. And in that park, family crystallized. Lila integrated whirlwind. Questions tumbling like blocks. Why books everywhere? Can we get a dog? Nights of bedtime sagas. Grace voicing characters with accents wild. Me smoothing cornrows learned from YouTube. Challenges arose, tantrums over transitions. Nightmares from past shadows, but love bridged. Patient as dawn. Summer camp for her. Art classes where she painted us as superheroes, capes billowing in storms. Grace and I stole weekends away. Hudson Valley cabins echoing with rediscovered intimacy. No curfews or carpools. Fall retreats evolved. Family-friendly now. Lila's corner, a riot of crayons. Writers bonded with her. One gifting a journal, for your adventures. Kiddo. Winter holidays magical. Tree trimmed with her handmade ornaments, popsicle stick stars. Glitter flaking like snow. Hanukkah candles flickered beside a menorah Grace inherited. Christmas stockings bulging with trinkets. Kwanzaa kinara glowing community. New Year's. Lila asleep upstairs. We clinked glasses on the fire escape. Cityscape twinkling below. To chapters unwritten, Grace toasted. And the ones we revised together. Years accelerated. Lila blooming preteen sass and soccer cleats. Braces glinting in grins. My second book delved into motherhood's quiet revolutions. Grace's murals adorning covers. The bookstore thrived. Annex added for kids, coding and queer history circles. Challenges persisted, midlife aches. Grace's knee from old soccer injury flaring in rains. My eyesight blurring deadlines. Riley's life crossed paths once. At a lit fest panel, mutual admiration exchanged. No shadows cast. One autumn. Lila's school play, a midsummer night's dream. She is Puck. Mischievous sprite. Backstage. Post curtain. She launched into our arms. Did I nail it? Perfectly speechless, Grace quipped. And we laughed. Trio unbreakable. Winter 2035. Grace's 50th loomed. Surprise party at the gallery, her works evolved. Bolder strokes capturing family fractals. Toasts flowed, Manny on cheap beer. You ladies built an empire from a walk-in. Vivian. Frailty veiled by wit. Love like yours, it's the real art. After. In bed. Her head on my chest. Half a century. Feels like yesterday. Best plot twist, I murmured. Fingers in her silver-streaked hair. Spring renewal. Lila off to college in Oberlin. Majoring in environmental lit. Empty nest echoed. But we filled it, travels, Italy villas where Grace sketched ruins. Me jotting essays on olive groves and old loves. Japan cherry blossoms mirroring our first spring. Haiku exchanged on napkins. Fall harvest. Grandkids? Not yet. But Lila's partner Jamie, a soft-spoken engineer, hinted at futures. We hosted thanks LGBTQ dinners. Table groaning under turkey and tofurkey. Stories swapped till plates cleared. Winter's wisdom. Snow softer now. Joints creakier. Memoir trilogy capped. Final volume on legacies. Grace's forward, a love letter illustrated in fading light. One dawn. Routine shattered, Grace collapsing in the kitchen. Mug shattering. World tilting. Hospital lights harsh. Diagnosis Parkinson's early onset. Tremors betraying steady hands. Grief crashed. But resolve rose. Therapy adapted. Art therapy for her. Sketches shaky but soulful. Lila flew home. Jamie too. Family fortressing. Still us, Grace rasped one evening. Hand trembling in mine. Through the shakes. As always, I vowed. Kissing knuckles. Years tempered. Her mobility waning. Wheelchair races down aisles for laughs. Retreats she emceed from afar. Voice via video. Spirit undimmed. Bookstore passed to Jack's. But pages unbound endured. Plaque, founded in speechless moments. Lila's mom. Twins arriving squalling. Us grandparents doting. Stories recycled with new ears. Grace's final winter. Hospice overlooking the park. Lila reading aloud from our journal. Me holding her as breath shallowed. Walked in on you, she whispered. Eyes distant. Best accident. Speechless still, I choked. Last kiss featherlight. Dawn broke. City stirring. Her absence a hollow vast as oceans. But legacy bloomed, funerals turned celebrations. Toasts to the womanhood inked hearts. I wandered the apartment. Ghosts in every corner, her laugh in the bathroom echo. Our bed still dented. Spring came. Cherry relentless. And I wrote final epilogue, not elegy. But affirmation. Love doesn't end in silence, it echoes. Ripples through lives touched. Stories spun from one vulnerable glance. In quiet. I hear her, we must love one another or die. We chose life. Messy and profound. Leaving a trail of words and warmth. Human. To the core.